Jacob's Well, a popular swimming hole near Wimberley, will remain closed to swimmers for the foreseeable future.
The drone entered the water without hesitation. For a brief moment, everything looked almost unreal. Its lights drifted through the crystal-clear blue water of Jacob's Well, revealing colors that seemed impossible inside a cave. Golden rays of sunlight filtered through the surface above, illuminating pale limestone walls that shimmered with shades of turquoise and emerald. The water was so transparent it barely seemed to exist, giving the illusion that the drone was floating through open air rather than descending beneath the earth. If someone had seen only those first 30 feet, they would have believed they were looking at one of the most beautiful places in Texas. But before we continue this incredible journey into one of America's most mysterious underwater caves, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We're working toward our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us bring you more true stories of history, science, and unexplained mysteries. Now, back to the story. Beauty can hide terrible things. The drone had not been sent to admire the scenery. It had been built for a far more dangerous purpose. Its destination lay far below the sunlight, inside a section of the cave that experienced divers whispered about as the Trap. Over the decades, at least 12 people had entered those passages and never returned. Some had vanished so completely that their bodies could never be recovered. Inside a nearby control van, scientists watched live video feeds on a wall of glowing monitors. Their mission sounded simple enough: create the most detailed map ever made of Jacob's Well. Instead, the camera would reveal something that transformed a routine scientific survey into one of the most unsettling discoveries ever made inside the cave. Long before anyone lowered a robot into its depths, Jacob's Well had already become a legend. Hidden within the rolling hills of Texas Hill Country, just outside the quiet town of Wimberley, Cypress Creek winds peacefully across ancient limestone that was formed nearly 100 million years ago beneath an inland sea. In the middle of that gentle creek sits a perfectly round opening, about 12 feet wide, cut straight into the bedrock like a doorway leading into the earth itself. That opening is Jacob's Well. Every summer, hundreds of visitors gather around its limestone ledges. Families spread out picnic blankets nearby. College students laugh as they wait their turn to jump. Tourists lean over the edge, amazed by water so clear they can see deep into the blue below. The spring remains a constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year because it is fed by the enormous Trinity Aquifer, one of the most important freshwater systems in the American Southwest. To everyone standing above it, Jacob's Well feels like paradise. It looks peaceful. It feels refreshing. It has become one of the most photographed swimming holes in Texas. Yet beneath that inviting surface lies something entirely different. Every person who jumps into the water is unknowingly entering the mouth of one of the most dangerous underwater cave systems in North America. Jacob's Well is not actually a well. It is a karst spring, a vertical opening created over millions of years as slightly acidic groundwater slowly dissolved solid limestone, carving chambers, tunnels, and narrow passages deep beneath the surface. Grain by grain, the rock disappeared until nature created an enormous underground labyrinth that no engineer designed and no human fully understands. Most swimmers never discover that hidden world. They descend into the first chamber, enjoy the cool water, and swim back to the surface. That first room, flooded with sunlight, extends only about 30 feet below the creek. For ordinary visitors, the adventure ends there. For cave divers, however, that first chamber is only the beginning. Beyond it lies a maze that has earned Jacob's Well a reputation feared throughout the cave diving community. Divers rarely speak about the cave with excitement. Instead, they speak about it with respect. Some simply call it the diver's grave. The deeper chambers seem almost designed to challenge every weakness a human being possesses. 4 major chambers descend one after another into the earth, each more dangerous than the last. Connecting them are narrow tunnels with names that sound less like geological features and more like warnings left behind by previous explorers. The passage between the second and third chambers became known as the birth canal because it is so narrow that divers often have to remove their tanks and push them ahead before squeezing through. Farther down are places called the coffin and the final squeeze. Those names were not invented to frighten newcomers. They were earned. The greatest danger is something almost invisible. The remarkable clarity of the water convinces divers they can always see their surroundings. But beneath that clear water rests a thick layer of incredibly fine limestone silt that has settled over centuries across the cave floor. One careless movement is enough. A single kick of a diving fin can send that powder exploding into the water. Within seconds, perfect visibility disappears. The cave becomes a solid wall of white. Divers call this terrifying phenomenon a silt-out. Inside that cloud, every point of reference vanishes. A diver cannot see their instruments. They cannot find their dive partner. Most frightening of all, they may lose sight of the safety guideline leading back to the entrance, assuming they placed one in the first place. Once panic begins, the situation deteriorates with terrifying speed. Breathing becomes faster. Air disappears more quickly. Direction loses all meaning. The cave no longer feels like a place. It becomes a prison. And for too many people, it becomes the last place they will ever see. Once panic takes hold inside a cave, time begins to disappear. Every breath comes faster than the last. The diver's air supply, once carefully calculated, starts vanishing at a terrifying pace. Thoughts become confused. Familiar passages suddenly seem unfamiliar. Every direction looks the same. Then comes the moment every cave diver fears. The realization that the way back can no longer be found. One by one, precious minutes slip away until the air is gone, and Jacob's well claims another victim. Over the years, at least 12 people have lost their lives somewhere within these flooded passages. Some entered the cave expecting adventure and never returned. Others remain so deep inside the unstable chambers that recovering them has been judged too dangerous, leaving the cave itself as their permanent resting place. Yet the tragedy never seemed to weaken the cave's strange attraction. If anything, it strengthened it. Every new generation of divers heard the stories and imagined they would be different. Young, ambitious explorers continued arriving at the well, convinced they could reach places no one else had reached, or finally solve the mystery hidden beneath the limestone. The accidents became so frequent that local authorities finally decided something had to be done. Workers lowered heavy steel bars across the entrance to the deeper cave system and welded a thick grate into place. It was built to keep divers out and bring an end to decades of tragedy. For a while, it seemed as though the story was over. It wasn't. After sunset, determined divers quietly returned, carrying bolt cutters instead of dive cameras. Again and again, the steel barrier was cut apart. The cave refused to stay closed, and the mystery beneath the water proved stronger than every warning placed above it. Eventually, researchers realized that if the deeper chambers were ever going to be explored safely, another person could not be sent into them. Something else would have to go instead. On a calm Texas morning, scientists and geologists gathered beside Jacob's well with a different kind of explorer. A white operations van overlooked the water, Its rear doors opened to reveal rows of high-definition monitors glowing inside. Thick cables stretched toward the edge of the spring, where technicians carefully prepared a compact, bright yellow remotely operated vehicle named Explorer. Unlike a human diver, Explorer did not need air. It could withstand crushing pressure. Its powerful lights could turn complete darkness into daylight, while multiple 4K cameras and precision sonar would record every inch of the cave with remarkable accuracy. A fiber optic tether connected the vehicle directly to the control van, allowing everyone outside to watch the mission unfold live. The objective sounded simple. Reach the fourth chamber. Create the first complete three-dimensional map ever made of Jacob's Well. Slowly, the vehicle disappeared beneath the surface. For a few moments, the screens showed the same breathtaking beauty swimmers had admired for generations. Sunlight illuminated pale limestone walls, turning the first chamber into a glowing world of turquoise and gold. Then, everything changed. As Explorer descended farther, daylight faded into deep blue. By 80 feet, the sun had disappeared completely. The vehicle switched on its powerful forward lights, sending bright white beams into absolute darkness. Ancient limestone walls emerged from the blackness, shaped by moving water over countless thousands of years. Then came the narrow passage divers had named the birth canal. Barely wide enough for the vehicle itself, the tunnel forced the operator to reduce the thrusters almost to idle. Every movement had to be measured with extreme precision to avoid disturbing the loose silt covering the floor. Minutes later, Explorer emerged into the third chamber. The room was larger, darker, completely silent. The systems reported everything operating normally. The operator slowly guided the vehicle toward a narrow opening at the far end of the chamber. The walls immediately pressed inward. The tunnel narrowed. Loose gravel covered the floor beneath the vehicle, shifting almost imperceptibly with every movement of water. No human had looked into this place for decades. Then something interrupted the endless pattern of stone. A tiny flash reflected back toward the camera. The operator froze. It wasn't limestone. He zoomed in. The image sharpened. Standing upright in the gravel was a scuba fin. No one inside the van spoke. The camera drifted closer. Nearby rested a heavily corroded scuba cylinder, half buried beneath decades of accumulated silt. Mineral deposits coated its regulator. A torn section of black wetsuit clung silently to a rock projection. Then the lights revealed something no one had expected to see. Partially hidden beneath layers of gravel lay the skeletal remains of a diver. The atmosphere inside the control van changed instantly. Only moments earlier, the mission had been a geological survey. Now it had become something far more personal. Explorer hovered silently, its lights illuminating an underwater tomb untouched for decades. The equipment surrounding the remains clearly belonged to another era of cave diving. Investigators carefully examined every detail visible on the high-definition screens, hoping to understand what had happened inside this deadly passage so many years before. The cave itself seemed to provide the answer. The tunnel was extraordinarily narrow. Its floor was made of unstable gravel, capable of shifting like slow-moving sand whenever disturbed. The evidence suggested a chilling possibility. Whoever had entered this chamber had not simply become trapped. The cave had slowly buried them. Explorer had not reached the end of its journey. The vehicle continued drifting deeper into the fourth chamber, its lights sweeping slowly across walls that had remained hidden for decades. Every movement was deliberate. Every new angle revealed another piece of a place almost no human eyes had ever seen. Then another shape emerged from the darkness. The beam settled on another set of scuba tanks. A second diving fin rested nearby, half swallowed by the gravel. Inside the control van, nobody spoke. The silence was heavier than anything the scientists had encountered since the mission began. The cave seemed to be telling a story all by itself. What had once existed only in scattered survivor accounts and rough hand-drawn sketches now appeared on high-definition monitors with startling clarity. For the first time, researchers could see the fourth chamber exactly as it was, preserved beneath decades of darkness. The images suggested something terrifying. Jacob's Well was not simply an underground maze. It was a living geological trap. Its loose gravel shifted constantly, burying anything that remained still for too long. The cave had guarded its secrets for generations. Now, at last, it was beginning to reveal them. To understand why those forgotten remains had come to rest inside the fourth chamber, the story had to travel back nearly half a century. It was September 9th, 1979. Cave diving was a very different world. The sport had not yet developed the strict safety culture that modern divers take for granted. There were few universally accepted standards, no mandatory cave diving certifications, and very little standing between an adventurous diver and a decision that could cost a life. It was an era driven by curiosity, by confidence, by the irresistible desire to reach places no one else had ever seen. Among cave divers, Jacob's Well represented one of the greatest challenges in Texas. The mysterious fourth chamber had become something almost legendary. Very few had reached it. Even fewer had returned to describe it. For experienced divers, it was the ultimate frontier. Kent Mopin understood exactly what that challenge meant. Friends described him as experienced, confident, and fascinated by Jacob's Well. Every successful dive seemed to deepen his determination to explore farther than before. No matter how much of the cave he had already seen, it never seemed enough. Joining him that evening was Mark Brashear, a student at San Antonio College. Younger than Kent, Mark shared the same adventurous spirit and looked up to the more experienced diver. They were part of a group of 8 friends who had traveled to Wimberley for what was supposed to be another weekend of exploration. As the Texas sun disappeared beyond the hills, the group prepared their equipment. Kent and Mark entered the water first. Another diver, Joe, followed close behind. Together they descended through the familiar first chamber, continued into the second, and eventually squeezed through the narrow opening known as the birth canal. Everything seemed routine, until it wasn't. Reaching the far side of the third chamber, Kent stopped beside a narrow crack leading into unexplored darkness. Without saying a word, he removed his steel tank, pushed it forward into the opening, and began pulling himself after it. Mark immediately did the same. Joe froze. This had never been part of the plan. He flashed his dive light toward them, trying to get their attention. Neither diver turned around. Both disappeared farther into the narrow passage. Unsure what else to do, Joe struck his dive knife against his scuba tank. The sharp, metallic ringing echoed through the water. He waited. Nothing came back, only silence. His air supply continued dropping. With no choice left, he kept his light aimed toward the passage for as long as possible, hoping the beam might guide his friends back. But every passing second made staying more dangerous. Finally, Joe turned toward the surface. As he began ascending, something changed. The crystal-clear water that had surrounded him only moments before suddenly clouded over. A thick white wall of silt expanded upward through the cave. Somewhere below, the gravel had collapsed. Whether it had been disturbed by the divers themselves or by the unstable cave floor giving way beneath them, Joe could not know. He only knew what it meant. When he finally reached the surface and pulled himself from the water, the quiet evening suddenly felt different. The others gathered around as he struggled to explain what had happened. Even before the rescue efforts began, an awful realization settled over everyone standing beside Jacob's well. The cave had claimed 2 more explorers. As Joe swam toward the surface, the cave transformed around him. The water that had been perfectly clear only moments before suddenly became a wall of white. A massive silt-out rolled upward through the passages, swallowing every trace of visibility. Something had disturbed the unstable gravel deep inside the cave. Whether it was Kent and Mark forcing their way through the narrow passage, or the cave floor collapsing beneath their weight, Joe could not know. He only understood what it meant. When he finally broke the surface, he was alone. The quiet Texas night surrounded him. He looked toward the dark opening in the water, hoping against hope that another diver would emerge. None did. He shouted for help, his voice echoing across the limestone banks. But deep inside, before anyone else had arrived, he already knew the truth. Jacob's well had claimed 2 more lives. A grave in the gravel. The emergency call reached a police officer who immediately contacted Don Dibble. Dibble owned a dive shop in San Antonio, had served as a Navy diver, and was widely respected as one of Texas's most experienced deep-water rescue specialists. He had answered difficult rescue calls before. He also knew what a late-night emergency at Jacob's well usually meant. The chances of finding anyone alive were painfully small. Still, he never hesitated. Within a short time, Don arrived at the well with his partner, Paul Battaglia, accompanied by a team of trained volunteer rescue divers. The group that had come with Kent and Mark remained gathered along the limestone bank. No one spoke much. Shock had replaced conversation. One diver explained that he had tried to enter the passage after the pair disappeared. For only a brief moment, through the disturbed water, he believed he had seen shapes inside the tunnel. Perhaps bodies, perhaps only shadows. Whatever they were, fresh gravel already seemed to be covering them. Don quietly walked to the edge of Jacob's well and stared into the dark circle beneath the water. Years of rescue experience had taught him when courage crossed the line into recklessness. The conditions were impossible. Darkness, zero visibility, loose silt, an unstable cave. He made the hardest decision of the night. No rescue diver would enter until daylight. The operation would begin at first light. Everyone believed the cave had already claimed its victims. None of them realized it was still dangerous enough to take more. Morning arrived beneath a heavy silence. The rescue team descended carrying an unusual tool. Instead of shovels or heavy equipment, each diver carried a small garden trowel. Inside an unstable underwater cave, delicate excavation was the only option. When they finally reached the entrance to the 4th chamber, they found exactly what later investigations would continue to describe. The entire passage was blocked by a massive pile of loose gravel. It looked less like solid ground and more like sand trapped inside an hourglass. The divers began removing it by hand, one careful scoop at a time. But every handful they cleared was immediately replaced. Fresh gravel flowed downward from above, filling the space almost as quickly as it had been emptied. The cave seemed to be rebuilding its own barrier. Working inside that passage felt impossible. It was like digging a hole in dry sand while underwater, surrounded by darkness, breathing compressed air, and knowing that every passing minute increased the risk of never returning. As reports reached the surface, they became increasingly alarming. Listening to his team describe the conditions, Don Dibble reached another difficult conclusion. He would have to see it himself. He refused to ask another diver to enter a place he was unwilling to enter first. Methodically, he prepared his equipment. Game Warden Calvin Turner volunteered to serve as his safety diver. Following rescue protocol, Spare air cylinders were staged at depths of 25 and 75 feet. A safety line was carefully run from the surface deep into the cave. Finally, Don reached the entrance to the blocked passage. He stopped, checked his pressure gauge. 100 pounds per square inch. He quickly calculated the remaining air against his depth, the amount of work ahead, and the cold water surrounding him. At best, he estimated he had about 10 minutes. He gave Calvin the familiar OK signal. Then, he pushed forward. The instant his shoulders entered the opening, the cave moved. The entire gravel pile gave way. Rock and silt crashed downward in a single violent collapse. Within seconds, Don was buried up to his arms. The clear water vanished. Darkness became absolute. He could not move. His arms were trapped beneath the gravel. He could not strike his tank to signal for help. He could not wave to Calvin, who was only a few feet behind him. The only thing he could hear was the sound of his own breathing growing faster, far faster. Every rapid breath emptied his tank more quickly than the calculations had allowed. The 10 minutes he thought he possessed were disappearing. Pinned beneath tons of shifting gravel, Don felt the edges of consciousness beginning to fade. In that terrible silence, he reached a conclusion no rescue diver ever wants to make. He believed he was going to die inside Jacob's well, beside the two men he had entered the cave to recover. Rather than waste his final breath struggling against the impossible, he made a decision born entirely from desperation. He stopped fighting. He accepted what he believed was inevitable. For a moment, Don Dibble stopped struggling. The crushing weight of gravel held him in place, the darkness around him complete. Every breath emptied what little air remained in his tank, and he knew the mathematics of survival no longer worked in his favor. He believed there was no way out. Accepting what he thought would be his final moments, Don made a desperate decision. He opened his mouth. The cold, silty water rushed in. Then something extraordinary happened. Without conscious thought, his body rebelled against surrender. A violent, involuntary convulsion surged through him. The ancient survival instinct buried deep within the human nervous system, refusing to let go. The movement was small, barely enough to matter. Yet, it was enough. Somewhere inside the cloud of white silt, a faint light pierced the darkness. Calvin Turner had seen the expanding silt cloud and instantly understood what it meant. Without hesitation, he pushed deeper into the blocked passage, unable to see more than a few inches in front of him. Holding a spare regulator, an emergency octopus line, he reached blindly through the darkness, searching for the trapped diver. Then, at last, two hands met. Don felt the regulator brush against his fingers. He seized it instinctively, pulled it toward his face, and forced it into his mouth. The first breath filled his lungs. It was the breath of a man who had already accepted death and somehow been given another chance. But escaping the cave did not mean escaping danger. As Calvin helped him begin the ascent, another crisis was already unfolding inside Don's body. During the struggle beneath the gravel, he had swallowed large amounts of air along with the muddy water. As they climbed toward the surface, the surrounding pressure steadily decreased. The trapped air inside his stomach began expanding. There was no way for it to escape. With every foot they ascended, the pressure inside his body grew worse. The pain intensified until it became almost impossible to think. Later, Don would say there were simply no words capable of describing it. He knew enough about diving medicine to understand exactly how serious the situation had become. Ascending too quickly could prove fatal. Ascending too slowly might leave him trapped beneath the water before reaching safety. Neither option offered certainty. Faced with an impossible choice, he chose the only one that still offered hope. He climbed, as fast as he could. Every stroke toward the surface felt like a battle against his own body. Finally, he burst through the water into the open air. Those waiting on the limestone bank stared in disbelief. His stomach had swollen to an alarming size. The moment he removed his regulator, an agonized scream echoed across Jacob's well. The pain continued hour after hour. For 12 relentless hours, it never eased. Doctors at Brooke Army Medical Center initially suspected decompression sickness and immediately placed him inside a recompression chamber.